I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're making one of my childhood favorites, split pea soup. As a chef that likes to cook at home, I always save everything, and this drives my wife absolutely nuts. I'll have bags of bones and bags of little bits and pieces in the freezer, and it drives her crazy. She's like, what is this? What is this? And I'm always like, well, I need that for so-and-so, right? And whenever I have a ham on the bone, like a smoked ham on the bone for the holidays or for a special occasion, I always save the skin, I always save the bone, I always leave a little bit of meat on the bone as well because I want to make split pea soup. This soup is modeled after my mother's, and this is how mine's a little different. Of course, I'm a chef, so I need to change things. I have my nice piece of ham with the bone intact that I'm gonna make my own kind of ham broth or ham stock out of. And that's what I'm gonna use. She would probably use like a small ham that she got at the supermarket and water. I am going to use some sort of stock. Normally, if I didn't have this bone, I'd buy that little piece of ham and I'd use chicken stock. For my split pea soup, this is what you're gonna need. One nice meaty ham bone, split peas, potatoes, onions, bay leaf, carrot, and celery. And as usual, the recipe with the amounts will be in the description down below. Just to be clear, I'm using a bone-in smoked and cured ham, not a fresh ham. Fresh ham is roast pork. The thing that I love about getting this ham is that I get several meals out of it. Roast ham one night, ham salad, which you can check the video out up here because I did a video on ham salad, and split pea soup. So it might be a little expensive to buy a whole ham, but you get a lot of meals out of it, and that's one of the things I love about it. The first thing I do when I'm making my split pea soup is make the ham stock or broth. I keep it super simple. I don't put any vegetables, I'm not putting any herbs in it. I just want a ham flavored liquid. The vegetables will come later. Again, this is a simple soup. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take any kind of bits and pieces of ham that I have. I have my bone. You can actually see that I had some skin that I trimmed off that goes in there. And this just goes in my water. What I'm gonna do is put this on the stove, let it come to a boil, lower it to a simmer, and let it cook until I start to see that the joints are falling apart. You're getting a lot of like gelatin and connective tissue that's gonna give this stock some body. And if your bone is frozen like mine, it might take a little longer for this process, but just be patient and let it cook until you see those separations. One thing chefs do all the time is while they're waiting for something like that stock to cook, they'll prep their other items. You know, you don't want to wait for the stock to be done and then start prepping. This way, we have everything ready, which is called, yes, mise en place. We get our mise en place together while that's cooking. All right, let's cut the veg. My onions, I'm going to just cut the tops and the bottoms off. This is just the way that I do it. And I'm gonna put these into the stock. One thing I was always taught was to save your onion ends and skins for your stock. I had an old German teacher that would save all of this stuff. And his argument was that the skins will give your stock a nice golden flavor. And that's always stuck with me. So I always just cut the tops and the bottoms off. And I know that I said earlier that I probably wouldn't put any vegetables in there, but I have it, so I'll just throw it in there, you know? So I line everything up. I kind of peel everything first, and then I will chop. Peel, organize, basically get all of these little skins and pieces away because this stuff is not food. The soup's gonna cook for a little while, and I don't really want my onions to melt away, so I'm gonna cut them a little on the large side, and I just kind of cut them into, you know, nice big chunks. And I still want to see a little bit of onion, right? You can cut them a lot smaller and, you know, they'll melt away into the soup. But for the most part, I want this to be kind of a chunky soup. I'm not going to put the onions and the other vegetables together because I'm going to sweat these vegetables out after we have our stock ready, just to develop a little more flavor. I'm not just going to dump everything into the pot. That's what a lot of people do with soups. They just dump everything in and let it go. You're not developing the flavors you need to develop. With my carrots, I'm just cutting it into nice chunks. And I like a fair amount of veg in this just because it should be hearty. And then celery. I'm going to cut the bigger ones down the middle. And again, fairly decent sized chunks. Cool, let's set those aside. And let's do our potatoes. So the potatoes I'm using are Yukon Golds. If there's any blemishes, you can just cut those blemishes away. I have a bowl of water over here that I'm going to store them in. The potatoes go later in the soup. I usually put them in halfway through the cooking process of the actual soup because I don't want them to disintegrate. I want them to be kind of nice and chunky, and they cook a little faster than the other vegetables. Now, I've probably said this before in other videos, but how I peel potatoes quickly is I usually take the top and the bottom off, and then I just kind of go around the potato and connect the top and bottom. So it's a super quick peel. And now I'm just going to kind of cut these in half and half again, and then just nice chunks. I want it to fit on a spoon. I'm always thinking about the end user or the eater, the person that's eating this. We don't want it to be like too huge that it doesn't fit on a spoon. The vegetable mise en place is done. When the stock is ready, we'll put the soup together. All right. My ham stock is done, right? Just came off the heat. It's got a little fat on top. I'm fine with that. I want some of the fat in there. It's flavor. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fish out any sort of pieces of meat that I have. Because there was a couple of pieces in there. Fish out. You see how the bone's coming apart here? Fish that out. I'm going to deal with that in a little while. And then there's a nice piece of like meat in there too. Just get that out. I'm just going to take a fine mesh sieve and a container and strain the stock out. After I strain it, I'm going to wash the pot. I'm going to use this pot to make the soup. The stock is done. The ham is cooling off so I can handle it. It's time to put the soup together, and this is the super easy part about it. My pot's getting hot. Just going to add some vegetable oil to it, like a fair amount of vegetable oil, and I'm going to add my onions. Simple, right? A lot of time when people make soup, they just dump everything into a pot, pour water over it, and boil it away. I want to build layers of flavor. So I'm going to sweat out my onions. I'm going to throw my bay leaf in too. And once the onions start to get a little bit of color, then I'll start adding my other aromatics. While we wait for that, let's talk about my pot. This is a huge pot, no doubt. End of the day, the excuse is I'm a chef and I like having large pots. This pot drives my wife absolutely insane because it's big, unruly, and it takes up the whole sink. We have a pretty big sink. When we built the kitchen, we wanted a really large sink, and this thing almost takes up the whole sink, or at least half of the sink, so it's hard to get around. It's hard to store. I put it up in the cabinet above me, like right there, out of the way, but my wife just can't stand it. I love it. It's like, I love large pots. It just call me crazy. I like to add a little pinch of salt while my onions are cooking. Just a nice pinch. You want to be careful with the salt because the ham is salty, but you do need some seasoning here. My onions are starting to get a little bit of color, light brown, smelling nice and roasty. I'm going to add my celery and carrots and just toss them around. We'll just wait for these to also get just a little bit of color. So everything's starting to get a little golden, which is good. I'm going to add my peas. Just toss them around a little. And then I'm just going to add my stock. And I'm not going to add all the stock. I'm going to add about 3/4 of it. And I'm going to reserve some just in case the soup is too thick, right? Give it a good stir. The stock is hot, so this should come to a boil really quick. And we're going to cook this out until the peas fall apart and thicken the soup. Let's give it a nice pinch of salt. And then a hefty dose. I love my black pepper, if I could just get it to come apart. A nice crushing of black pepper. I'm going to put it on the stove behind me and we'll let it come to a simmer. I'm wearing gloves because this is still hot and this offers me just a little bit of protection. But I'm just going to go through the ham pieces and get any big chunks of fat off and just kind of cut them into chunks. Again, like the potatoes that fit onto a spoon. I'm not too worried. I'm a little, like I said, a little rustic. And then we can get this. And you can see it kind of pulls apart off of the bone just for the fact that we've cooked it for a while. And I'm just going to trim away some of that fat. I'm not keeping the fat, you know, and just kind of slice that up. Chop, chop. So I got most of the meat off of this. I'm gonna get rid of the bone and the fat. I don't need it anymore. And I'm gonna clean this up, and then we'll go over and throw this into the soup. The soup has come to a boil. I've lowered down simmer, but I wanna show you something really quick. We're gonna have to skim some of this scum off. So come on over, come on, come on. So you'll see there's some scum on top of the soup, right? And that's usually just proteins, it's a little bit of starch from the peas. I just don't want that to boil back in my soup, so I'm just gonna get my ladle in there and take some of that off. There's a little bit of fat in there too. Just get the preliminary ones off, and then I'm just gonna let it go. Good, there we go. So it's kind of not the purty stuff. Good. The soup is happily simmering away. It's time to add the ham. So it all just goes in. If there's any juice or anything, that's fine. Put it in there. Give it a stir. The peas are about halfway done. They're starting to fall apart. So let's add the potatoes. If you look, they're starting to break down a little. They're not totally falling apart yet, but this is a good time to start adding our potatoes. So the potatoes go in. This is also a good time to re-season. Potatoes take a lot of salt, so I'm gonna add a couple of hefty pinches of salt, a little more black pepper. I'm gonna let this simmer away. And next time we come back, it should be done. The split pea soup is done. Let's give it a try before we plate it up. Check the seasoning. I got my handy dandy Star Wars tasting spoon. I'm gonna put a little more pepper in. I like lots of black pepper. And just a touch more salt. Give it a stir. Look at that. Beautiful color. Look at that texture. Okay, let's plate it up. I have my nice clay bowl here. Potatoes are nice and tender without falling apart. Same thing with the carrots and the celery. Make sure you get nice chunks of ham in there. It is time to taste. Let's get in there. The color is beautiful. The veggies look like they're the right consistency, so I'm going to get a little bit. Well, let me get a piece of ham first. Oh, really good. Carrot. Nice and soft like my wife likes it. And the potatoes, because I put them in later, aren't totally falling apart. They still have some texture. So good. It's heartwarming. It's like, it makes you feel like it's a hug. It's a soupy hug, right? I like to serve this with some Italian bread with salted butter or some Irish brown bread with Kerrygold butter. I'd like to know how you make this soup and how you serve it. Put it in the description down below. Write me a comment. I love hearing from everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. As always, the recipe's in the description down below. We also have merch, t-shirts in the description down below, and the P.O. box. I'd like to thank my Patreon patrons for supporting us. We really appreciate it. And that is my split pea soup. I hope you enjoy. I'm Chef Frank. This is Protocooks. Have a good one. You got levels. Levels. How's my voice? I want to start singing. Should I learn how to sing, Karen?
I think you should.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was just thinking about myself.